Okay, here we go. Dana, thank you so much for doing this. We at the Center for Transforming Engagement have started just 2 months ago doing these C10 live events where we just want to talk about things that leaders, lay leaders, clergy, nonprofit leaders, people that used to be leaders and are deconstructing their faith and other things about leadership. We just want to provide conversations. So that's what we're going to do today. And our board chair has extensive experience with leaders. And so I'm so grateful that you agreed to do this with me. So Dana and I both do consulting for churches and church teams and other areas. So I asked him to send me a list of what are the things that are most on leaders' minds these days? What are they asking? What do they want coaching for? So we have a bit of a list that we're going to go through, but if we don't touch something that interests you, go ahead and put it in the chat and we'll discuss it. But we're going to start today by addressing something that is coming up no matter where you are. It could be your family. It could be a team you're leading. It might be your church or your place of business. But I don't know if all of you have noticed, but right now there is a lot of holding differences, right? There's a lot of polarization and a lot of big gaps of difference going on. So especially happening in teams even. So one of the things we first wanted to I wanted to ask Dana about is how do you think about as when you're coaching a leader, how to understand and appreciate differences on the team?
Yeah, I love it, Rose. Thank you. I think that's probably one of the most often uh, kind of suggested questions that people have. How do I understand and appreciate the differences? And the foundation that I come from around that is really about trying to think of the other, trying to think of the other person and where are they coming from? I know I have my biases. I know I have my agenda. I know I have my frameworks. I know I have the experiences of my life and what's worked, what hasn't worked, so I know I'm bringing all that in and I almost need to acknowledge that right up front that that is certainly in place. But the biggest opportunity that I have that we get to partner with people on is this idea of trying to see people for who they are in the fullness of who they are. People don't always experience that, whatever the population, most people have experiences in their life that they can think of where that person or that group, that team didn't see me well, and recognize the power of differences. I come more experientially from a background around positive psychology. So I'm looking at through the lens, and I even like, I'm still say old school at this point, but still wearing glasses, right? I wore contacts for years, but I'm wearing glasses. The lenses that I see the world through are important for me to understand. And I know we can't swap lenses, and that's not going to help us create focus. But that idea of understanding things from the positive aspects, I think we spend so much of if we look on heaven forbid, we turn the TV on or look in the news or whatever, all we see are places where it isn't positive. It's rarely do we see that. And so our world feels very overwhelming. And I think we have to remember as leaders that we have to try to dispel some of that, to put some of that aside to the best of our ability, name what is, because I have to acknowledge I'm going into a tough conversation with somebody. The world is getting more and more frightening. The more polarized we all feel, the more this is going to be the challenge. But the understanding the differences, there's no magic formula. It's more thinking about did that person wake up this morning and what's the world that they're experiencing and what do they bring with them that's causing them to act and respond and behave the way that they are. And if I can try to dispel some of that bias or help them see some of that bias, not by pointing it out, but more pointing out my own challenges, my own bias. So part of it, I think, understanding and appreciating differences is really around sharing and being willing to meet people where they're at, partially because I'm not the expert. That definition of expert, right? Everybody heard that formula. So X, right, is an unknown. and a spurt is a drip under pressure, right? So an expert is a drip under pressure. So I'm not the expert, and neither is Rose, and neither are any of us. We are fellow soldiers, fellow sojourners along a journey, along a path. And I
Yeah.
think the golden rule so much comes into play. How do I appreciate people for who they are and treat people the way that I would want to be treated? And for me, I've worked in some very tense situations, teams, environments, cultures. And by trying to understand, seek first to understand and then be understood. I know
St.
those are
Francis.
pretty, yeah, just pretty, almost at times feels like throwaway statements. But if we can embody, what does that feel like? What does that look like? How do I truly listen? How do I truly understand and truly get to experience the shoes that the person walks in? Then I can try to have a chance of us meeting. And the same with teams. I use this a personality profile to help me get there sometimes more quickly. But some of us have those available and some don't. It's not required. But sometimes tools can help us try to see our similarities, but also see our differences,
Right.
allow those differences to become strengths. If I'm really good at this and you're really good at that, and I see the world this way and you see the world that way, if we can blend them both together, we're going to get to see things much more powerfully because we're going to get to understand the whole picture instead of the world through my own lens and not just yours.
You said so many great things there. I just want to, here's like, well, as you were talking, a couple of things that came up for me. One, when you first talked about the lens that we look through and trying to understand that people might see it through a very different lens, depending on where we're coming from, how we've been formed. There's this one, maybe you've done this before. I wish I could do this, but there's this one little thing I do with a team where I will draw a circle and put, if Becca, were you ever in my leadership class at the Seattle school? I think I did this with you guys. So draw a circle and then put 3 dots across the circle. And then I just have everybody look at that circle and write down everything that they see. And then after like a minute of everybody doing that, I go around the room, and I mean the things like people see train tracks, they see a donut with a bagel with 3, I mean, like I would say another thing they see, but they say it, but I'm not going to say it on this Zoom. You guys might be able to guess. But anyway, they see like railroad wagon wheels, like so many things. But at the end of that, then what you can say is like, we all were looking at the same picture, but look at how many different perspectives there were. So it's a perspective exercise to show we all come with a certain lens how we see the world. So I love that you said that, because getting a team to understand that is super important, I think, for just for team unity and purpose and priority and all the things. So I love that you said that, being able to understand perspective and appreciating differences, like instead of fighting against them, being able to lean in and really, I like that you said using assessments, because for me, that's helpful for me when I'm working with a team. There's about 4 different assessments that we'll do as a team. So just that very thing, it shows, oh, you're really good at this and I'm really bad at that. So instead of me, being in a lane that I'm really weak in, somebody on my team that is really strong, and Steph and Sam will tell you, I have a lot of areas that they just step into because they are so strong and I am not. To which, to your point, is just because you're leading a team doesn't mean you're the expert at everything. You have to have the team be allowed to use their skills and gifts that they've been given to be a part of that team. So I really like that.
I love that, Rose. And you just touched on something I'm going to build on too, and
Yeah.
is that idea of strengths, capitalizing on what my strengths are and what your strengths are, and the two of us together are going to be 1 + 1 = 10 instead of 1 + 1 = 2. And I think that's where the idea of looking for the positive, looking at strengths and looking at those opportunities for the areas where you're better at that or you're good at that, and looking also for the places sometimes somebody's overused strength can potentially become a weakness. So
Yes.
being mindful of, like, I can be really good at this, But if I am just a bulldog and I just am moving at something only one direction and take a few people out along the way, well, that's not going to be helpful either. So that idea of looking at strengths, looking at places where we can align with each other and empower each other and try to see things. One wise mentor of mine who created that instrument that I referred to that I use a lot it was Dr. Roger Berkman, who's a fighter
Oh,
pilot
yeah.
in World War II, and he was shot down, and he had time. He was taken in by a family in Belgium and protected from being captured. And they were a pretty well-to-do family in town. And so he had a lot of chance to sit and read in the library and basically had a pretty amazing experience getting to think about and what similar, Rose, to what you just said, where that tool came from was this idea of perception. He's a B-17 pilot, flying the same missions, in the same places, in formations, in the same places. And what fascinated him to create that tool was by experiencing the same things, and they'd do after-action debriefs. And in those conversations, what he started to realize was that they were in the same place doing the same thing at the same time and had such vastly different experiences. And that led to the curiosity to say the power of difference. And so he had lots of quotes, but one of them that I love is this idea of that when we get a proper framework, a proper experience of our perceptions, our perspectives start to change. The perspective that I have when I start to see you for who you are. And I think leaders sometimes forget that because also it's not the old days of my grandparents where, if you were the leader of something, that was your job. Well, now we have leaders who carry multiple responsibilities, multiple hats. I'm the leader of something, but I also have a lot of do function, not just lead function. And so how do I allocate that? How do I lead and understanding differences when I'm so focused on getting the stuff that I also need to get done? And how do I empower other people to get their stuff done when I'm not always mindful because I'm so focused on what's my job?